Imagine you're dead. No, seriously, for a second. Imagine you're dead and you've been buried by your family and friends, but the night of your burial, something or someone comes and disturbs your grave. Something or someone comes and does something to your dead body that is so bizarre, so heinous, so crazy that you thank God you are dead and not alive to witness it. What you just imagined might have been fiction for you, but it was the harsh reality of 50 corpses buried in a graveyard in Karachi. This is the story that shook Pakistan's very faith in humanity. This is the story of what happened to 50 corpses in Pakistan. Hi everyone, welcome to Desi Crime, a show where we dive deep into some of the craziest cases from around South Asia. I'm your host Aryaan.
And I'm Aishwarya.
The case I have for you today is right out of a low production indie horror film. But the fact that it's real and not a horror flick I'd be Netflix and chilling to gives me the heebie jeebies.
Alright, Aryaan, right off the bat, any story that begins with a description of any sort of 50 corpses doesn't bode well for the case at all.
Yeah.
But alright, I'm really curious. Take us to Karachi where this happens.
Now, most towns and cities across the world have graveyards where residents can come bury their dead, conduct rituals, and pay their respects. Paposh Nagar, a small town in Karachi, was no different. It too had its very own qabristan, its own graveyard. But this graveyard wasn't exactly similar to the one you'd find in your neighborhood. It appeared that the graves here seemed to move, as if the buried were coming back to life in the dead of night. All this began in 2003 when residents of Paposh Nagar began observing weird occurrences surrounding the graves of their loved ones. Burial in Islamic communities is usually done in the vicinity of the person's residence. So, more likely than not, most bodies in Paposh Nagar graveyard belong to ex-residents of Paposh Nagar. This means that family members often visit the graves of their loved ones because it was within traveling distance. But one by one, these family members noticed that when they visited the grave a day after the burial, it was slightly different from how they had left it. Ever so slightly different. It was an odd observation for the first family, but it didn't stop there. Family after family after family reported such an occurrence of something feeling out of place. Sometimes the slab underneath which the body is buried seemed misplaced. Other times the chadar, a blanket on the grave, seemed fiddled with. Very subtle changes, I agree, but nonetheless they stand out to the people who visit the grave.
And Aryaan, for something to feel out of place, for something to feel weird in a graveyard,
Which is weird to begin with. Yeah.
such an eerie place to begin with, is so scary to me.
If that's spine chilling, what's about to come is unbelievable.
Okay.
As the years pile up, so do the bodies in this graveyard. And although this graveyard is frequented by many people, nobody is able to figure out the cause of such disturbances. Naturally, residents start speculating as to what's happening, who is or what is disturbing the final resting place of their loved ones. And as happens in any brown Desi community around the world, be it Pakistan, India, or Canada, Auntie Gs and Uncle Gs love to talk, discuss, and deliberate, each with their own theory and each convinced that their theory is correct. Naturally, rumors spread like wildfire.
Aishwarya, our parents and especially our grandparents, they are skilled gossip mongers. It's a skill that they have honed and sharpened on WhatsApp as the years have gone by.
Yeah.
I remember once my nani, my maternal grandmother, she woke us up at 5 in the morning, told us to hide under our beds because people are turning to stone in India.
Oh, wow.
So
I've never heard that before.
So she believed that. Imagine what would be happening in a place where the graves are actually
Moving. Yeah, that's insane.
As you can imagine, theories pop up, and to be fair, there are quite a few that actually seem plausible. The first and seemingly most likely explanation is of illicit organ trade. Somebody or some group of people was perhaps digging out the freshly buried corpse to harvest organs. And this doesn't seem too far fetched because illicit organ trading is a problem in parts of Pakistan. To quote the Pakistani newspaper Dawn, quote, "The mafia runs trade in human organs with impunity," end quote. While this theory seems maybe kind of possible, it doesn't exactly fit the circumstances. You see, Paposh Nagar, no pun intended, is kind of posh. It is in the Karachi Central District and is pretty well policed. Moreover, something like an illegal organ trafficking cartel isn't run by individuals but rather mafias, proper organized crime. And the police insiders had no such tips or information regarding any activity either. Additionally, organ trading happens more from morgues and less from graveyards. That is because bodies in the morgue haven't decomposed, and usually kidneys can still be harvested. Once buried, it's really difficult to successfully harvest any organ viably. I know this sounds all too gory, but hey, again, you clicked on this episode. So this theory was tossed out of the window. And in truth, this logical, rational theory was merely a cover up to mask the residents' real fear. Their real fear was surprisingly not organ trafficking in the graveyard, it was what scares all of us about graveyards: ghosts.
So, you all know we just started a series called Bhoot Busters where we travel to all of these locations, haunted locations across India. But that may not give off the impression that I am literally the uncles and aunties of Paposh Nagar. I am terrified to the core. I enjoy it because it gives me a sense of adrenaline, but it only gives me that sense because I'm so scared, Aryaan. So yeah, organ trafficking and all aside, that's all fun and
You'd
games.
rather the
I
explanation
rather,
be
yeah.
paranormal.
No, I'd rather they take my lung away. I'm so deathly scared of ghosts. Traffic me
Okay.
all you want. I don't want any spirits around me. Jeez.
Fair game, fair game.
You're just like you, nobody wanted to believe the haunted theories. But before I get to them, there are other more realistic, logical theories besides ghosts that might just explain the phenomena of desecrated graves in Pakistan. This explanation is not unique to Pakistan and, in fact, is rampant in India too: the theft of corpses by medical students. Yes, you heard it right. This is all too common. Medical students, especially from private universities, are known for stealing corpses to use in their labs for practicals.
I'm sorry, I need to wrap my head around this. So you're saying private university students in specific are stealing these corpses? Aren't private university students in Pakistan, like everywhere else in the world, the wealthier generally of all student
Right, but
populations?
like being a wealthier university doesn't necessarily try to access, because think of India's example. Our government medical colleges are better than the
Sure.
private ones, and
Yeah.
they tend to have access to government hospitals where more people die and therefore their bodies can be
Sure.
used. But I think public or private, it's a little
What is that,
weird to
bro?
be digging out
Super weird.
dead people.
No, the
to
image in my
learn.
mind is of these two like scrawny college kids picking up a cadaver bride style and taking her back to their dorm room. This is the weirdest thing. Okay, it's really weird. Don't do that, you guys. Don't do that.
These are the people that
What, does it give them extra credit? Like what?
I guess they just need bodies to learn their practicals
So are the
on.
professors making the kids go and get these?
I don't know.
I'm sorry.
I think that's
I
that's
need
an episode of its
answers.
own.
I need to conduct a research on this. All
But
right.
but you're right. These corpses are called cadavers.
Cadavers are always short on demand, despite being a subcontinent of 1 billion plus. Basically, if you've ever filled out an organ donation application, one of the options is to give your body for scientific purposes. This usually entails becoming a cadaver so that medical students can better understand human anatomy. Well, all might be fair in love and war, but this is science, and not everyone is comfortable with the thought of their heart being scalpeled out and shown in a biology class to two scrawny 21-year-olds. Many just choose to give their organs to those in need for transplants. Because so few cadavers exist and so many medical students, there is a lot of theft that takes place in graveyards and kabristan.
I think one movie scene that captures this scarcity issue of cadavers amazingly well is that Munna Bhai scene where they take away that Chinese tourist when Munna requires a cadaver to perform an experiment on in the hospital. It's one of my favorite scenes. Circuit tricks this guy, and yeah, I just absolutely love it.
I have to say, don't kill me, y'all. Don't kill me,
Don't say
Aryaan.
that. Don't say that.
I want to
We can cut
start
this.
by
Don't
saying
say that.
I've watched Lage Raho Munna Bhai. I've just not watched the first
Munna
part.
Bhai MBBS, you haven't
I've
seen.
not watched. I just know that one scene with that really nice song where everyone in the hospital starts dancing on the beds. It's just
Speaking of Munna Bhai, the man that embodies stay crazy, stay desi, and he also embodies hustling a little bit to make some
Absolutely.
money on the side. Here we are telling you to go buy our merch. You can find our merch in our YouTube store down below, or go over to Karak Merch at Desi Studios. You buying the merch, A, helps spread the word about what we're doing here, but it also helps run this engine that makes awesome content like Desi Crime and Boothbusters and all the other projects we're working on. So head over to our merch store and, buy a little something something.
if you love what we're wearing, if you love any of this, you can get it all for yourself. So like Aryaan said, go to Karak Merch or go down to our YouTube store and buy it for yourself.
Anyway. And guess who is 17 minutes of a car ride away from Paposh Nagar? The very prestigious Liaquat National Medical College and Hospital. In fact, there are nearly 17 medical colleges in Karachi. Could be any one of them. So the residents decide to inspect for themselves. The caretakers of the grave are instructed to be on the lookout for mischievous students. Days go by. The students never show up, but the fresh graves continue to be moved and messed around with. Even the caretakers of the graveyard, which the residents had employed themselves, namely Wazir and Riyaz, they too did not come across anyone. What a job, by the way, huh? Just two dudes hanging in a graveyard at midnight. Not sure if I envy them. Nothing was making sense now, and graves were still tampered. Now the perpetrator, whether a ghost or a person, had become careless. So in Islamic burial, a slab is laid over a piece of land which is dug out beforehand. In 2003, when these activities had just begun, there was very slight movement observed in these slabs. But now it was 2010, and residents found entire slabs were turned over. Graves were completely vandalized. The charade had gone on for 7 whole years, and these insidious activities became less insidious and more blatant. Mischievous students were ruled out. Something more demonic was at play. The residents kept avoiding this theory. Nobody wants a malevolent spirit in their neighborhood. But as hard as the residents of Paposh Nagar tried to avoid this paranormal theory, police reports emerged from a nearby graveyard. Bones were found outside the graves. Bones of children. 2 men were arrested as well. These men were stealing bones from the graves of children to perform black magic. This shook the community to its core. Anytime black magic, or Jadoo Ton as it's called in Hindi, is talked about, mass hysteria grips these communities. Their worst fears were confirmed. Or were they? Once again, it wasn't black magic either. When the arrested men are questioned, they reject any wrongdoing in or around Paposh Nagar. And it's fair to ask, why should we believe those people who were doing sacrilegious rituals to begin with? But see, firstly, these 2 men were honest about all their other activities. They confessed to black magic and desecration of graves in other graveyards. So rejecting their role in the activities in Paposh Nagar didn't necessarily reduce their punishment. More importantly, and this brings me to the next part of the story, is that there aren't any signs of black magic at our graveyard of concern. I agree the details and disturbances were all too eerie, but none suggestive of black magic. Everyone in this town became Sherlock Holmes by this point, trying to figure out this puzzling mystery. In 2011, 8 whole years after this began, people realized that of all the graves that have had some inexplicable activity occur, all of them, every single one of them, belonged to a female corpse. And by all, I mean somewhere around 40 to 60 graves. Just to contextualize how big that number is, understand this. This graveyard isn't very big. In fact, the Paposh Nagar graveyard was deemed full by authorities in 2003, and any more burials subsequently were banned as of that year. But it's 2011 right now, so that's 8 years of unregulated burials. Of course, guidelines were not followed, and this graveyard became overcrowded. But to have 50 graves all belonging to women is a hint. A hint to what we don't know just yet. It is October 31st, 2011. The time is around 7 pm and the winter night is set upon Karachi. Folks are returning home from the fifth namaz prayer of the day. Only a few people are gathered in the graveyard. Probably loved ones are spending time with their deceased, but the dark night sky above is quaint and quiet until a man comes running and shouting and all covered in mud, mumbling words as if he was possessed by a demon. Everyone rushes to his help, trying to understand what this insane man is saying. Upon closer inspection, everyone realized who this man actually was. It was Muhammad Riaz, caretaker of the graveyard. His face was pale, clearly horror-stricken. Everyone was puzzled as to what was happening. Here is a man who has spent a decade working at the graveyard who suddenly runs out shouting and screaming like it was his first time at a graveyard. Once he's brought back to his senses, Muhammad Riaz explains what just happened. He swears to God that he just saw a bright light emanating from the eyes of a corpse. But not just any corpse, a freshly buried female corpse. He said her eyes were glowing.
What? Alright, as much as that scares the ever-living bejesus out of me, I don't think I fully understand. He says he saw glowing eyes on a female corpse.
Yeah.
Is that a buried corpse or one that's outside its grave? Can you explain that a little?
Aishwarya, this is where the story gets really confusing and interesting at the same time.
When the bystanders arrive at the grave of the woman whose eyes were allegedly glowing, they find that she's no longer buried. Someone has removed the slab that's meant to cover her grave. Someone had forcibly tried to enter the pit in which the woman laid. That someone was right there. Everyone's eyes turned to Riaz's shirt, which had mud on it. That's someone who had been disturbing graves in Karachi for nearly a decade. That's someone whom everyone feared was a demon or perhaps a spirit, was good old Muhammad Riaz.
I have to get this straight. There is almost a decade-long period where these corpses are being fiddled with. Everyone can tell.
Yeah.
There are two men who usually guard these
Yeah.
graves. No other explanation seems to fit,
Yeah.
yet the graves continue to be fiddled with.
Yeah.
And not one single person thought that the two men that they leave with these corpses every single night probably have something to do with this.
Hindsight is 2020, right?
But this is just...
I'll just say why Riaz was fiddling with these corpses is so out of left field. It's so beyond imagination that I empathize with Paposh Nagar residents when they couldn't figure out. And I'll get to that in just a second.
All right.
People started connecting dots. Freshly buried, slabs removed, female corpses. Their minds went ding, ding, ding. Without wasting a second, a mob of locals, infuriated, disgusted, appalled by what they are seeing, surround Riaz. Before long, the cops arrive and arrest him. Herein begins one of the most infamous investigations, and perhaps the simplest also, in the history of Karachi police. Harrowing details emerge with more twists to follow. On the night of 31st October 2011, Mohammad Riaz, in his own words mind you, started digging close to the left foot of the freshly buried corpse. He switched on his flashlight on the phone to enter the pit where the woman was buried. As he approached her body, he indeed saw a light coming out of the eyes of the corpse, which is when he ran for Kingdom Come. This is what he told the police. But just like you and Aishwarya and like all our viewers right now, the police desperately inquired, why did you enter the grave to begin with? Had there not been light in the woman's eyes, what was your plan? And the answer comes from the man himself.
या कैसे दफन हो जाती थी मगर असर में दफनाते थे ना मैयत तो मगरिब को हम जो कब्र खोते तो अंदर जाते थे वो गलत काम होता करते थे समझो।
तुम कब्र खोदते थे, अंदर जाते थे और
कब्र खोदते थे, स्लेब हटाते थे पीछे वाले पाँव की जगह में, स्लेब हटाया, स्लेब वो कब्र की जगह पे ना कहाँ पाँव की जगह होती है वो हटाते थे, फिर अंदर जाते थे, पहले वो जाता था अंदर, फिर उसके बाद फिर मैं जाता था, तो फिर गलत काम करते थे, कब्र में अंदर मुड़ देता था, लड़की होती थी।
These dirty actions are, simply put, having sex with corpses, intercourse with dead bodies, clinically called necrophilia. Necro meaning dead, and philia meaning affinity too. Necrophilia is thus the condition where a person derives sexual pleasure from engaging in intercourse with a dead human being. Mohammed Riaz was a necrophile. But it didn't end there. In fact, it didn't even start there. For around 10 years, the people of Paposh Nagar was busy figuring out what might be happening to the graves of their loved ones, never once considering that the culprit might be the very person in charge of maintaining the graves. Nobody ever considered that the man who they paid rupees 200 monthly to water the graves of their friends and family was the someone they had been looking for. But how did all this start? Mohammed Riaz was a young man from a small town in Pakistan called Sargodha. Looking to make it big, he moved to Karachi in 2003, looking for jobs of any kind that came his way. Here, he meets a man named Wazir from another town called Liakbad, and they became friends. Shortly after this, Wazir guy employs Riaz at his workplace being the Paposh Nagar graveyard. His job is simple: to water the mud above the graves. This is crucial in Islamic burial because the watering of the mud helps keeps the soil intact and also has a religious significance of longevity. Both Wazira and Riaz also acted as the de facto caretakers of the graveyard, an informal position handed to them by the people of the town. But what went so wrong in this seemingly normal story? Let's hear from the man himself.
तो यहाँ कराची क्या कारोबार के लिए आए थे, मजदूरी के लिए आए थे?
हाँ जी, मजदूरी के लिए आया था यहाँ पे काम करने के लिए।
क्या काम करते हो?
मैं कब्रों को पानी वानी डालता हूँ।
कब्रों को पानी वानी
जी हाँ, मालिक।
कितने अरसे से?
हो गए 16-17 साल हो गए।
16-17 साल हो गए।
जी।
अच्छा, यहाँ किस जुर्म में हो?
यहाँ समझो मेरे साथ एक लड़का था वजीरा, तो समझो ये वो गोरकंदा में पानी डालता था, वो कैसे मैयत दफन होती थी, मैयत आती थी औरत की, तो उसको दफनाते थे समझो, और मगरिब के बाद समझो उसके साथ वो गलत काम होता था, कार्रवाई करते थे।
It gives me chills to listen to so many tapes of him talking about what he did and then translating the Urdu into English. And by quote, did what we did, Riaz means defile the corpses. It seems like when Riaz came to Karachi, he was just a normal guy, but his proximity to Wazira enabled him. As per Riaz, at the beginning of his tenure as graveyard caretaker, Wazira would disappear for hours only to emerge from the graves at night. One fine night, Riaz caught Wazira in the act of having sex with dead bodies. A normal person would react to this unfathomable situation with disgust and anguish. But unlike normal people, Riaz joined Wazira in this inhumane act.
I can't believe what I'm hearing. And I'm kind of surprised the thought of it being necrophilia didn't come to my mind sooner. But again, it didn't to the residents of Paposh Nagar either.
Exactly.
So I'm not blaming myself for that too much. My question to you is this. Because they were actively having sex with the corpses, did it then, because of that, have to be corpses of people that were just now buried, like recently, without their bodies?
That was the whole reason, yeah. Freshly buried corpse, and therefore, I guess it's easier to have intercourse. I mean, I don't even know the science of that, right? But
Yeah,
I guess
neither do I.
Common sense would dictate that be easier than a decomposed body.
Which also explains why families noticed rather small changes in the graves. Because obviously, the older a grave is, the more likely it is on its own to be a little disheveled, or families more likely to visit less and whatnot. But that's absolutely insane.
What started in 2003 with one woman had become nearly 15 women as per his own confession, with only God knowing how many more there were. Many questions arose. How is it possible that 50 female bodies were defiled over a span of 9 years and no one caught? And by the way, who is Wazira? Where is Wazira? So let me try and break it all down for you. The reason why Riaz and Wazira were successful in this unholy act was because of how well they planned it. They only targeted corpses buried after the fifth namaz, which ends at around 5 pm. So by sunset, in the cover of darkness, they abused their victim. The way they identified a female corpse, by the way, was due to the blanket or chaddar laying on the grave. This is a tradition in Pakistani burials. So whenever they saw a fresh corpse with a chaddar on it, they knew that that's their next victim. As for Wazira, the instigator and accomplice who Riaz holds accountable for his, should I say, fetish, Wazira died of his drug and alcohol habits. But please note, this is all Riaz's testimony. There is no way to prove if a Wazira existed, and nobody yet has come forward to prove that.
The fact that we have no proof of whether or not Wazira existed is so scary and so creepy to me. But you're saying nobody in the town even came forward to say, yes, there was a Wazira, he worked at this graveyard.
There is no evidence of a Wazira ever existing, which suggests me to believe, and this is just what I think, that Wazira was a figment of Riaz's imagination. I think Riaz was a mentally troubled individual who, while being a necrophile, was also perhaps schizophrenic. And he had propped up this imaginary friend that justified and legitimized his own desire to do what he did. Again, this is all speculation.
But that would explain the glowing eyes on the female corpses.
Right, exactly. It substantiates quite a few things.
Also, to me, it's a little bit unbelievable that you're one person who has necrophilic tendencies and the next person who happens to come and work at your grave with you also happens to have them. They're not like a common fetish to have. So, wow.
The case of 50 corpses absolutely blew up in the media when a famous Pakistani news anchor interviewed Riaz in jail. His casual attitude and straightforward answers are truly mind-numbing. 4 articles of the Pakistani Penal Code were filed against Mohammad Riaz. Article 297, 376, 377 and 354. Article 297 is about the violation of corpses, which is not that severe a crime with only 1 year's punishment. However, 376 and 377 revolve around unnatural sex and are very similar to India's penal code. 377 in India too is against unnatural sex. That, along with 354, can involve a life imprisonment and even a death penalty. So, where is Riaz now? Well, he's being tried separately for all 50 corpses that he defiled. And so this case is basically going to go on forever, and he's going to be in prison for life forever. I think another really important point to bring up before we end this case is how in countries like the US, necrophilia is actually considered a psychological problem that needs to be treated by medical health and mental health professionals. But in Pakistan and other Desi communities, it's still a criminal act, and this is something that was talked about across Pakistan and debated in national newspapers. In 2011 and 2012, established newspapers like The Dawn talked about how necrophilia needs to be viewed as a psychiatric disorder so that people going through it can be treated instead of punished. But again, that is a debate that'll rage on forever. For now, we know that there exist 50 corpses out there that will never get justice because they are lifeless at the end of the day. Justice for the living is hard to come by. For the dead, it's even rarer.
If you like what we do here at Desi Studios and absolutely love what we're wearing today, this is merch you can go buy all for yourself.
You can buy this Desi Crime merch in our YouTube store on the link down below at Karak Merch. Keep the engines at Desi Studios rolling so we can pay our videographer right behind the camera to make these amazing episodes just for you.